We're now going to transition from this conversation with BC's largest technology company to a discussion including two of BC's leading drivers of technology and innovation. My friends Gerri and Bill are true ecosystem Sherpas in the province and in Canada. Here with us to talk through the nexus between innovation and ESG is Gerri Sinclair. Gerri is BC's Innovation Commissioner, who brings a breadth of experience through her career as an entrepreneur, a leader in capital markets, digital media, information technology, and so many other things. And Gerri's going to be joined by my friend Bill Tam. Bill's the co-founder and COO of Canada's digital technology Supercluster and former head of BC Tech. Bill's entrepreneurship, stewardship, and leadership in Canada's technology scene has had profound impact both across the country and right here in British Columbia. And it's really led to, through his leadership, the region's momentum and growth that we're experiencing today with 7 tech unicorns in British Columbia through the pandemic. And I also know that both Gerri and Bill, from personal experience, walk the talk of living the example of paying it forward. And they're going to be joined and led by Kwang Lim. Kwang is a partner at Bennett Jones, whose practice includes corporate finance and M&A, with a focus on serving clients both internationally and locally that are entrepreneurs, startups, and scale-up businesses. So thanks for joining us, Kwang, and it's over to you.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you, Gerri and Bill, for joining us this morning. As we've heard throughout the series, including this last session, companies are seeking creative approaches to meet their sustainability goals and stakeholder expectations, while also producing a financial return. While in the past these objectives may have been seen as contradictory, today they are an imperative, being made possible through technology and innovation. Bill, to kick it off, from your perspective as a technology leader and co-founder of Canada's digital technology supercluster, how would you say ESG and innovation intersect?
Well, thanks very much for that question, Kwang. And I really enjoyed the conversation with Jill just now, because I think it actually exemplifies the types of things that we see here in British Columbia as the intersection between ESG and innovation. The supercluster was sort of founded on this notion that we could bring collaboration to bear in solving some of the most vexing challenges that society has to offer. And I think ESG and many of the things, whether it's environmental sustainability or things that deal with sort of social needs, are exactly in that wheelhouse. And we're fortunate to have founding members like TELUS and some of the big organizations like Tech and Canfor, Mosaic, the province of BC, and many others that have fortified this resolve. But the way I kind of look at the intersection between tech and innovation and ESG is that there's probably 3 laneways. You know, the first one is that technology and innovation can help to optimize the operations of any business. And I think in the digital space, which we focus on, that is ever more paramount on the backdrop of the recovery from the pandemic. So how you operate your business and create
Am I still on?
Gerri, I think you're on. Bill seems to be frozen for me, so I'm not sure. We'll let Bill maybe sort through the technological issues and unfreeze himself. But Gerri, while we've got you, it sounds like Bill was analogizing to a 3-lane highway here, and I'm eager to hear the further analysis around that. But maybe we can bring it a little bit more focused, Gerri. I'd like to ask you about innovation specifically in the context of climate change. In his recent book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, Bill Gates acknowledged that the climate change challenge has become too big to be solved in any other way than through innovation. As we head into COP26, what do you think are the opportunities for BC companies to scale up and contribute to this global challenge while also growing our domestic productivity and economic outlook?
You don't ask big questions, do you, Kwang? that could take the rest of the session to try and answer. Before I do, I just wanted to address something that Jill said towards the end of her presentation, and that is that there are now 6 women on the board of TELUS. I just wanted to point out from a personal perspective, I used to be on the board of TELUS and from I think 95 to 2001. I was the only woman on the board, and it was a very lonely place to be. And at that particular point, basically there was a stated willingness to bring more women on the board, but generally the feeling was we don't have qualified women, or if we knew about the women, we would bring them on. And now we move forward to this year, 2021, and the fact that there are 6 women on the board, the fact that we now have this comply or explain in terms of the number of women and minorities on boards. I guess what I wanted to start off by saying is, even though it feels slow to me and to a number of others who are working in this field, we are making progress. Okay. Now the question is, are we making, in terms of ESG and climate action, is it fast enough? And I think those of us who are kind of on the front lines of trying to push the needle as far as technology and innovation goes in terms of climate change, I don't think we're moving fast enough. So my first point I was going to make was there are incredible changes. I was a venture capitalist for the past 4 or 5 years, and when I started off, the investment in clean tech, which is climate change technology, was seen as a place that was a money sink. There was no way to actually drive returns for your stakeholders by investing in clean tech, and so with that kind of attitude, it was really hard to actually to drive the kinds of investments that were required to make change. We can see change. We can see change in terms of the attitudes of investors. We can see change across the board. But I guess I'll throw this out. My feeling is it's not moving nearly fast enough. Hi, Bill, you're back.
Hi, sorry, there seems to be a power outage in my apartment right now.
Not the greatest timing, but welcome back, Bill. Gerri was just wrapping up her response in terms of the climate change and innovation not necessarily being fast enough to deal with that. But I want to let you finish here on the sort of 3-lane highway analogy that you just commenced explaining. Maybe we can go back to you, Bill.
Sure. I think the first one I mentioned is that there's innovation that just improves and optimizes business operations. I think that's well known. I think the second one, which we've seen in collaboration, is how you can rethink your business and the business model around that. And I think that's the second part of innovation and the intersection with ESG. I think the third one is, in order to tackle some of these really big challenges, and I think Gerri probably just described them as it relates to getting to net zero and other climate change related items, it's going to take some breakthroughs. And that innovation scope of trying to get to breakthroughs is going to take a concerted effort from some of the top thinkers in these areas. It's going to be about getting researchers as well as industry working together with government in order to make these breakthroughs actually happen.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Now, zooming back out from climate change to more generally, and something that you've touched on a little bit, but at the end of the day, demand for a product or service is going to be required to enable the success of a company. How do we de-risk innovation and free innovative companies in BC to pursue bold ideas to meet that demand for products or provide solutions that larger companies or governments are needing? And let either you, Bill, or Gerri take that, for both of you.
Gerri, I could start if you'd like. I think part of the de-risking is to see if you could have shared interests with co-investment. I mean, I think we've seen in the past the opportunity for government to provide sort of co-investment dollars in areas where perhaps the certainty of the return on investment isn't there. And I think when in many of these, especially in the environment and climate change areas, it's clear there has to be sort of a collective effort and probably multiple private sector organizations all co-investing in an initiative alongside perhaps public dollars to really kind of realize the outcomes there. And I think there's also an intermix that says you have to build the regulatory frameworks and the standards and other modes of operation to ensure that whatever investments are made really have some continuity and some certainty when people are putting dollars on the table.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely, Bill. That co-investment is a huge piece of it, and as we've spoken on many occasions, productive collaboration among all aspects of the ecosystem is really required. I guess the big issue is it's really difficult for companies, large companies, to know what are the solutions that they really need, what is going to move the needle, and at what cost and at what risk. And so I think that a data strategy is absolutely essential in terms of de-risking that kind of investment. The other side of it too is, and I'll just speak from personal experience. I've seen the innovation ecosystem from the point of view of all of the components, because I started off in the academic world and I spun out technology, was an entrepreneur. I've set up accelerators and I have worked in accelerators. I've been a venture capitalist. I've worked in government and I've worked for, Microsoft bought my company. I worked for Microsoft. I worked for IBM. I worked for Telefonica. So I kind of seen the whole ecosystem. And I really love to say that BC is actually very strong in all of those components. Our universities are first rate. We've got great companies here where we punch above our weight in terms of the number of startups, lots of innovation. We used to be behind the curve in terms of the investment capital that was here, but that's growing. We have a lot of angel investment. We've got strategic investment. We've got VC investment right now. So that's not an issue either. But the issue, and this is what I think Bill is talking about, is the way the connective tissue amongst those components works, or in our case, sometimes doesn't work. So as I've been looking at the ecosystem, I've noticed, and part of my own personal experience has borne this out, that we, and in terms of government, I'm talking about government from a perspective, but also other parts of the ecosystem, we invest very heavily on the supply side of innovation. So there's a lot of money that goes into research. There's a lot of money that goes into creating companies and the commercialization of research. There's a lot of money that goes into actually helping these companies grow and towards the end of finding product market fit and early seed investment, angel investment. We're all working around helping these companies grow so that their product can actually find the customer base, and then from there scale and move from finding either a local customer or it could be an international customer. I'll come back to procurement and later on, I'm sure. But at any rate, the focus is investing in the supply side so that the supply side can ultimately find its demand, where the demand is coming from. And with my own company, we spun technology out of Simon Fraser, really cool technology. Took us, we took venture capital money, and it took us 2 years to figure out where the sweet spot in the market was, that who was going to buy this, who actually needed it, where was the need. And so I've been thinking a lot about how do you start to invest in the demand side of this supply demand, the supply chain, and then on top of that, how is this a green supply chain? How does ESG considerations fit into every aspect of that supply chain, and also how do you de-risk it for the market? So is it possible, for instance, to create a market demand by a group of corporations who share a need, and I know that's been the process of the Supercluster too, is figure out what the need is, bring a group of them together, not just one company, but bring a group of companies together and try, in terms of climate change and new innovations, try and figure out what through a number of test beds, figure out what the data is around it. How much is this going to cost? Is it going to work? So I think, to stop rambling, I think we need to focus more on the demand side of product market fit, and that helps both the demand, the corporations, the companies that need the innovation, and the smaller companies who are trying to fill that demand.
Yeah, and I think, Gerri, you're exactly right. I think we've been quite fortunate in the Supercluster to really experiment with that model. It really is demand side driven innovation, and there's a couple of elements to touch upon. There's sort of the co-creation aspect where you have multiple organizations sort of defining what the problem set is, and in that is a shared risk model because they're all co-investing in that. But at the end point of all of our R&D projects is really a customer who is going to take that end product and put it to use in their operations in the market. And in the ESG area, in particular in the environment area, we've seen, project categories. We've now invested in over 80 projects with a portfolio that's over $320 million of investments. And in the environment space, it probably I think we've got about a dozen projects in the natural resources, environment, food and sustainability, agriculture. In that category, we probably have another 30 projects in the health sector. And in all of these, what we've seen is that it really comes down to having really solid sponsorship from large organizations who are seeking to solve a problem that maybe they couldn't do on their own, or has ROI pieces that require some co-investment in order to kind of create the certainty that we're looking for. So we have a project exactly in that area where you're really aggregating data sets to look at environmental measures that impact the natural resources in the extraction businesses. We've got one on mining, which is looking at all of the microbiome indicators in aquatic, soil, rock, and I think that's got half a dozen different mining companies that are part of that project. Very excited about that. We have agriculture projects looking at remediation of soil and sustainability around that, adding precision agriculture into that mix. We have forestry projects that are looking at supply chain optimization from cut to harvest to ultimate production. And then we have a whole set of projects that are around the food supply chain and building sustainability and circular economy elements in how we take food from the growers all the way out to the retail stores, and how all that loops back in terms of the waste that we can avoid. So those are just indicators of the kinds of projects that we've been in, but in every one of them, as you've said, Gerri, is that there's an endpoint customer in it that's going to push through the adoption of this sort of technology so that we can accelerate the growth of companies in a more meaningful way.
And just to jump in here, Kwang, I think that what Bill and I are excited about at this particular point is here in BC and in Canada, we have the opportunity to achieve what I call a triple word score, which is if we get the pieces right, we can build a strong, robust ecosystem of innovation in the province. And we can also reduce greenhouse gases, and we can drive GDP. We can actually start to export these new products and services to global markets, so that BC and Canada can actually be the producers, the creators of these products, rather than outsource our climate change solutions to foreign jurisdictions. Because you see the money that the Biden administration is, I should say, desperately trying right now to spend, but it's not funny either, but at any rate, the trillions of dollars that are going into climate change innovation, and it would be, I think, a tragedy if we could not make sure that our BC companies are at the leading edge of taking advantage of that investment, rather than our corporations are going to be buying solutions from outside of the country.
Well, thanks both for your insights on that. I mean, some of the nuggets I took away from that are, co-investment, data strategy, make sure you invest on the demand side as well. Let's focus on that. Bill, turning it back to you, Canada's digital technology supercluster, as you mentioned, has advanced more than 80 projects and invested more than $350 million with Canadian firms, many of which are focused on advancing sustainability from an economic, social, and environmental perspectives. And you mentioned a few examples here in your prior response. Can you share with us some of the key examples which have helped to elevate BC's brand as a destination for ESG-driven capital? And what do you think is the opportunity looking ahead?
Tying it back to the theme that Greg started with is how do we make this region and capitalize on the ESG piece such that BC becomes a real attractive base for investments, not just capital, but human capital, firms wanting to do business here, productive pieces that deal with greater linkages to customers, et cetera. I think we've seen in the work that we've done is that, the Supercluster program internationally has kind of reached a new height of visibility. And I think we see a lot of firms and governments interested in what Canada has to offer around innovation. And if you tie that together with BC's sort of natural reputation around environment and sustainability, it becomes a fairly easy proposition to kind of interest firms from anywhere in the world to say, hey, take a look at what's happening in British Columbia around this. Now, how we translate that interest into real meaningful investment, I think, is up to everybody in this call and many of the other meetings that Greg and the Business Council have convened to date. I think there really is an opportunity to translate that into a set of actions, some of which is born by these new sort of innovations that smaller firms can work with larger firms to create new sort of ESG products and services that help to remediate the effects of climate change, provide more sustainability in how we do natural resources, build strength in our economy, especially as we recover from the pandemic, and the list can go on. But I think equally important is the fact that you can convene conversations with multiple stakeholders, including academics, government, agencies, that tie together the regulatory and standards frameworks that will actually make this happen, that pave a path for future innovations that can occur, and really kind of set the stage for saying BC can be the center of this kind of innovation in not only in Canada, but what Canada has to offer to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Do you want to turn it back to Gerri here? You touched a little bit on this, but in terms of collaboration, but do you think there are any sectors that are specifically ripe for working collaboratively together, Gerri?
Kwang, I'm not sure if you meant, are you asking me should forestry work together with mining? Is that the question? Or is the question the ecosystem around any one of the sectors? But the answer is yes, on all fronts. There's the point is we know there are no more islands and there are no more silos. We're now and especially when you think about global supply chains, you cannot help but think about global supply chains, and you cannot think about BC being so much reliant on our natural resources, and thinking about the global supply chains that already exist in terms of forestry and mining and agriculture and manufacturing and shipping. I mean, there are global supply chains there already. All of those are ripe for digitization, for new innovations in terms of optimization of those supply chains, number one. Mm-hmm. And then you think about mining and forestry and agriculture and all, and the projects, the kinds of projects that Bill has mentioned. And there's a whole set of new value add services that emerge, new kinds of minerals, new advanced materials coming in to those supply chains that BC companies, because we already have the global supply chain in our traditional industries, could actually take advantage of that global supply chain and become a fundamental part of that upon which everything else in the supply chain is reliant. So I kind of look at those two supply chains. And then I think about the digital infrastructure to support supply chain optimization, and the opportunities here for BC innovation are mind blowing. But just to jump back into your earlier question about, we do have a great reputation here for innovation as far as climate change is concerned. Our Clean BC statement and commitment is well known. It's well known, not only in Canada Canada, but throughout the world. But I think we have to take the next step, which is to actually make it happen. We're really good here in terms of the talk. It's the walk is really, it's now time to walk. I think you've heard me say that before, but yes.
Well, that's a great lead into my next question. And you've touched on it by saying that we need to, do a better job walking the talk. But we've certainly talked about the opportunities, including for collaboration. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges ahead and what we could be doing better. There's tremendous potential, momentum, and growing interest in BC's innovation scene. What do you see as some of the biggest barriers holding the firms and generally the ecosystem back? And this is for both of you.
I'm going to jump in first because I promised to talk about procurement, and there's no doubt that smaller BC companies, smaller Canadian companies have a very difficult time selling to government and larger corporations, and it makes it very, very difficult when a smaller company is trying to sell into London or New York. When the potential customer says, "Well, how come you don't have any customers in your hometown?" And it has a lot to do with procurement and the way the procurement policies have been set up, both in government, large corporations, and the risk adversity and all of those things. And so I think I'm hearing not only from all of the smaller companies that I've been talking to about how procurement is a major challenge for them, and it's going to become even more difficult in the Buy America First policies that are emerging from the U.S. So I think that again that we have to think really deeply about reforming our procurement, and also not only in terms of changing procurement policy, it's changing procurement attitudes about why wouldn't larger corporations want to support smaller corporations if they knew who they were and what they had, and that there was proof that the product would actually serve a need. So I think that I think we're moving. I see that there is movement here as well. That we're moving away from procurement seen as lowest cost bid. That's the only factor, to more ESG based criteria that are coming into procurement, and to the extent that we can actually band together and raise consciousness around the procurement process and how to fix it. I think that's a really important place to focus energy.
Yeah, and I think Gerri is touching on a few things that I would wholeheartedly agree upon. Like, there's a maturation that we're seeing in British Columbia in terms of how various sectors, or it's almost a case where we describe that as people have kind of grown up in their own instance, it's a bit tribal. And how do you get all of the different groups to kind of work together to solve some of these issues? I think it's an evolution. I think there's a cultural aspect. It touches upon procurement, but more at the core of it is, if we do the contrast with the US, you look at sort of something as simple as software procurement, and you say, well, why is it that in Canada, we actually, we purchase on a per capita basis only 30% the level of what US companies would buy on that sort of area? And if you go further and say, well, from an R&D perspective, we're at best half the level of comparable jurisdictions around the world in terms of business investments in R&D. And the cultural aspect is one where it's really about kind of setting the table and convening actors like the Business Council and what Gerri used to do on the Premier's Technology Council and various forms like that kind of break down the barriers in terms of how people view each other. And I think that maybe the added magic might be to move away from a pure procurement piece, especially when we talk about ESG, and look at areas where you can co-develop solutions where you might not know a priori. Procurement assumes that you know exactly what you're going to buy, and you're really kind of trying to get the best possible sort of deal or outcome on that. But in some instances, as I said, the third pillar of innovation and the intersection with ESG is that you just don't know what the answer is. Getting to breakthroughs is about defining the problem. and getting people together to kind of work on that problem together and having some sort of shared risk model on it. And I think that's where perhaps instruments like Supercluster or innovation policies like that can actually lend a hand in breaking down those cultural barriers.
So, Bill, can I ask you about that? Because what's in it for the co-investment if you don't know what the solution is you're looking for and you're not exactly sure of the problem? I mean, what are the levers to bring these groups together?
So ultimately, I think on the customer end of the equation, there's always, I think in some larger corporations, they'll look at horizons of investments, right? What do we want to invest in the next year? What do we want to invest in the next 3 years? What do we want to invest in the next 5 or 10? And the further out you go, the less certainty there is about what it is that you're actually going to do and exactly how you're going to get there. And oftentimes you kind of push that down the pipe. So when you look at things like, 2030, 2050 or what have you, it feels a lot like Horizon 5 and 6 sort of things, right? But you have to bring it into the current domain, and you have to do it in a way that says, I'm willing to put some risk capital into this equation because I know I'm going to have to tackle this. But by the time I get to that, the point in time where it's going to be a Horizon 1, Horizon 2 problem, I'm not going to have enough runway to solve that. So the incentive is a combination of sort of the social fabric that everyone recognizes the problems we have in front of us. There's a regulatory or sort of government agency piece that says, hey, we gotta sort this out. That's why public dollars alongside private dollars is so important. And so in the end, the ROI is really met. It's not as clear as something that you'd say, if I invest in this new ERP system or this new analytics platform to improve my mining operation, this is the return I'm going to get. In the environment space in particular, I think, it's really the overall cost of doing business and having the license to continue to operate is the big prize here. But to do it sustainably such that you can continue to kind of demonstrate your commitment towards the ultimate goal that everyone else in society has set for you.
Well, we're running up on time here. I think as our final question and as a lead into the next panel discussion, let's touch briefly on BC's position from the tech perspective in the global fight for talent. From your perspectives, how do we make the proposition for talented people to come and stay here in BC even more compelling?
Gerri, do you want to start?
Well, yeah, because it seems to me that any innovation policy without having talent as the number one driver is missing the boat. And I would say, luckily in BC we have amazing talent, and we have great universities and a college system, a great educational system that produces first class research, and then we have a lot of smart people who are creating companies. These companies now are really they're really struggling to find the talent they need. And I think in terms of my own consultation with companies, access to talent and procurement are two of the biggest issues. And by far at this point in time, access to talent, is the number. We used to talk about access to markets, access to capital, access to markets, and access to talent. Talent right now, in terms of the challenge, is the greatest one. So the whole question is especially too when more and more innovation has its roots in deep science and STEM, so it's on the supply side, is producing to continue to produce, right? And then the next thing is, so how do we create? How do we develop, and how do we retain and retrain and then attract new talent? All of those things, all of those vectors of talent need to be on steroids right at this particular point in time in order to meet the challenge, I think. So I can't talk enough about how that needs to be fixed.
So I think we already have the recipe for success. And the question is, how do you accelerate that? I know Joy's going to be speaking in a moment. I think our post-secondary institutions are probably the most fertile ground for attracting new talent into the mix. And they've done so for decades. I think we've seen the rise and the growth of the tech ecosystem here to the point where people acknowledge that this is a great place for people to come. And some of the relaxation and some of the openness by which we've kind of accepted like our expedited process for global talent, in terms of immigration policies, a lot of things that we can do to kind of take post-secondary students right into job and work opportunities. That's also created the baseline for attracting more talent. I think the key here is that how do you translate that into the future? And one of the things that we should be looking at is how ESG, and it touches on what Jill was saying earlier. When you create the cultural underpinnings that says ESG or even just social responsibility is a core fabric of businesses and how they operate here in British Columbia, more and more, I think societally, people are going to select the kind of companies that reflect the values that they bring. And if we as a region can do that at scale, then I think that gives us a better than average shot at not only retention, but accelerating the attraction of people that come and work here in British Columbia. And so I see ESG and talent attraction as interwoven. And I think we already have, as we said, in terms of just shining a spotlight on innovation and environment and climate change and agendas like that. I think British Columbia already stands at the forefront of that. The same goes for talent. I think it's a matter of translating that into action so that we can actually fulfill our true promise and potential.
Well, Gerri and Bill, thank you so much for your deep insights into this important topic and everything that you do for the community in your respective roles. Much appreciated. Greg, I think at this point I will pass it back to you for the next discussion.
Well, thanks so much, Kwang. Access to technology and sustainable energy solutions is critical to our future. But as we just saw, it's not infallible with Bill's power outage. But the great thing is we've got agile leaders here that can pivot when barriers emerge and opportunities present themselves. So thanks so much, Gerri and Bill and Kwang, for just an amazing discussion. There's so much potential, as we heard, for innovative firms across our economy. But one of the little known facts is that of the over 500,000 businesses in our province, only 1.8% of them have more than 50 employees. And so we lack that scale and at times those customers and resources necessary to really grow more productive and higher wage growth industries. We don't often retain those firms as well because the great ideas get purchased and taken elsewhere. So how do we scale firms across the economy, improve their productivity while keeping them here is going to be critical to increasing research, technology adoption, and a higher quality of life, as we heard. And if we get it right, Gerri and Bill have laid out a clear case that technology across the economy is going to play a crucial role in not only supporting a more sustainable economy, but higher wages and more exciting innovations to come. So those smaller companies, as we heard today, need an ecosystem of collaboration of opportunities to grow, and they need access to talent and to larger firms and government as customers by changing procurement policy and attitudes, and also require an aligned and forward-looking policies from government to support foundational needs on immigration and STEM graduates, and foundational technology like quantum and genomics, AI, and AR and VR that are really going to drive not just business and governments, but firm growth and opportunity here in BC. So what I heard is that if we get it right, we can create a more productive economy that results in a higher quality of life and greater opportunities for British Columbians, as we've seen through TELUS's scaling story and the impact they're having and the potential that Bill and Gerri showcased.